Hi, I'm Tyson Franklin, and welcome to this week's episode of Podiatry Marketing. With me, as always, is my co-host, Big Jim Mack. How you doing today, Jim?
Tyson, I'm doing well. Loving life. Things are good in Montreal. I've got no complaints.
That's good. And last week, I can't believe, I celebrated my 25th wedding anniversary.
Did you get in trouble for not mentioning it on the podcast, or?
Last week, yeah, I was supposed to mention it last week that, hey, this week is my wedding anniversary. And I had it written down to actually mention it too, because my wife occasionally will listen to some of the stuff that I do. So I didn't mention it. But if she listens to this episode, she go, oh, isn't that nice? He mentioned our 25th wedding anniversary.
You are a sweetheart. Definitely you'll score some brownie points with that mention. I'm a little bit behind you. I think this is number 14 for me. So.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to this month of going on a South Pacific cruise later on in the month. So that should be fun, to Fiji, Vanuatu, Noumea, I think. I didn't really care. Some friends just rang up and said, hey, do you want to go on a cruise with us for a week? Well, yeah, it's our wedding anniversary. And we said, we had dinner and all that. We said, let's have a bit of a trip at the same time. So we thought we'd do it in the same month.
Sounds like fun.
And it was only yesterday I was wearing a T-shirt that I now know I've had for 25 years because I bought it when we were on our honeymoon in Hawaii.
Nice.
And it is still going strong. I reckon I'll have it for another 25 years at least.
It'll come back into fashion by then.
I don't think it ever went out of fashion. My wife disagrees, but I think it's still looking pretty good. So, Jim, what are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, so today we're going to talk about getting started with patient video testimonials. I think everywhere look on the internet, on phones, on computers, videos are everywhere. And probably one of the most effective ways that you can communicate with potential patients and build trust in your local community is when you have these patient video testimonials. And while I know this is probably more of a North American centric topic, both it's legal to do in the US and in Canada.
UK as well. I think the UK, well. Yeah, Australia will get arrested. No,
but
if you don't get arrested,
I don't want to send anybody from the audience in Australia into prison. But at the same time, some of these lessons that we talk about can be utilized if you're going to talk about your own services. Obviously, there's a difference between you talking about what you do and when patients talk about you and the service you provide. But there's some kind of corresponding lessons that can be used for both. But really today we're going to talk about how do you create effective video testimonials for your podiatry clinic, and how that involves careful planning, execution, and how do you edit these down to ensure that these testimonials are engaging your local patients, providing information that's helpful to them, and really come off as being authentic. Because sometimes that's one of the kind of complaints you hear. If a patient's talking about me, they're going to know that I kind of cherry picked these patients to come in and talk about me. But
yeah,
it is one of these things where it does build trust because it's not you just talking about yourself. So I think it can be a common thing that people say, oh, push back a little bit against patient testimonials, but these things are very effective and there's a lot of different ways they can be used.
One thing I know that in Australia, for example, we can't do patient testimonials written or video. Not yet anyway. It may change down the track. But what an Australian podiatrist can do, one, and you're going to run through some of the processes of doing this the right way. But what an Australian podiatrist can do, if you happen to do a talk somewhere, it could be for Rotary, it might be independent retirees, whatever it is. After you've done that talk on whatever the subject is, you can interview the people who are at the talk and ask them to comment on how they found your talk on ingrown toenails or your talk on fungal nails. And you can use that, oh, Tyson was so good when he explained this and this. You can use that because technically they're not patients. Mm-hmm. This is just feedback on a talk that you did. So I think that's one way you could get around it.
That's a good way to approach it there. I think that is important. We're basically talking about social proof, right? Whether it be a video testimonial or someone that saw a lecture that you did that kind of speaks on your behalf or gives you some praise to others. That's what we're really looking for, is that social proof. Really, we're going to talk about some steps here that really will help you create some impactful patient video testimonials. And really start off with, it's important to determine what your goals of these video testimonials are, right? We've talked about niching down in the past, even in a recent podcast, but you want to make sure that the testimonials that you get and the patients you're going after to do the testimonials are really going to showcase specific types of treatment that are going to highlight your clinic's expertise in a certain patient segment, right? You're not going to if you're really into sports medicine, you don't want a testimonial about diabetic foot care, or if you want to do ingrown toenail surgery, you don't want to be talking about onychomycosis maybe or something. So really knowing what you want to get out of it is hugely important, because you're hoping these are going to build trust with potential patients. In order to do that and get the kind of return on investment for either your time or your staff's time of doing it, or you're outsourcing it to somebody else, you want to make sure that it's going to resonate with the right patients and the right kind of patient population.
Yeah, I agree 100%, because I don't think there's any point creating any content if it's not targeted or has a specific purpose in your podiatry business. Why talk about wounds if the last thing you ever want to see is a wound?
No, for sure.
Unless you're doing a video saying, if you have a wound, go somewhere else. They go, oh, okay, we will.
Yeah. And one thing you have to do also is it's because it comes into choosing the right patients, right? This kind of ties into the types of care you want to provide. Is who is that right patient, and how you select the patients that are going to provide the right testimonial. Are they an expressive, groomed, jubilant person who's going to attract? We talked about previously, attracting. Are they going to pull in patients that you want to see in your practice? And you want to pick those people who have had positive experiences and they're really willing to share. So maybe they've provided a written review in the past, or they've really been very vocal to you or your staff about being excited about the type of care they provided. So there's clues about who these right patients are. And by settling on them or knowing who they are can be really helpful. But you really want to consider a diverse group of patients. Obviously, you want to make sure they're in your niche. Maybe it's someone that's treating sports medicine. That's the weekend warrior type. It's the elite athlete. Maybe it's a high school athlete. Maybe it's men, it's women. You want to make sure you're diverse enough to really bring in a lot of different people in that patient segment that's really important to you, so you can focus on those kind of conditions and treatments that are offered by your clinic. And it goes without saying that, especially in the US and North America and maybe in the UK, you need to make sure that they sign a release as well. There's obviously certain legal aspects of things, but making sure that they understand that you're going to be using this on social media or in advertising and marketing, and just being really upfront with people and making sure they sign off on those things ahead of time, so they don't feel so they understand what they get themselves into is a really important component.
Yeah, and also, I mentioned this off air before, that I think ideally it's not it's not about having super good looking patients, but the patients that you have on your videos have got to depict the type of patients you want more of in your clinic. So you don't want a barefooted, one-tooth hillbilly getting on there who can't string two words together. And you go, you may have fixed their heel pain perfectly, but that does not depict the type of you want people to watch your videos go, yeah, that's me. I want to come in there. So it's got nothing to do with age, but it's a certain type of patient that I think always looks good on video, that just has one of those appealing personalities.
Yeah, you don't want to be pulling answers out of people, right? Even if someone had an amazing result or has expressed themselves maybe a little bit more in a reserved way about the kind of care they provided, you're probably going to err on the side of someone who is a little bit more bubbly, a little bit more outgoing, and just really wears their heart on their sleeve about the amazing care that they provided. You don't want them to be too in that way, but in our profession, we work with people all the time. You know that those 5 or 10 patients that are your ideal patients that you've provided a great result to, that have that ability to communicate not only with their words, but also just the way they express themselves and the way they carry themselves. I think you're right on the ball there, that everyone knows those 5 or 10 patients. So it's a matter of just focusing on them. And the next step really is jumping into having not necessarily a script, but understanding what questions and what prompts are going to get the kind of best responses for people, right? So you need to develop a list of open-ended questions or prompts to really help guide the testimonials. You don't want to definitely, there's kind of good questions and bad questions like you talked about. You just don't want yes or no. There's definitely ways to ask questions that'll lead to yes or no's. And that doesn't make for a very appealing video testimonial. Did you enjoy your care that you received at ProArch Podiatry? Yes, it was good.
Well, I've had that on the podcast when you have guests on, and I have had some guests where we will talk, and I'll go, so when you did it, yeah, is that right? And they go, yes. And I've had to stop the podcast and go, okay, I'm just giving you a bit of word of warning. I'm going to go back and ask this question again. And this time, I need you to say more than yes. I said, because that sounds really boring on a podcast if that's all you're going to say. Oh, yeah, sorry, I was just nervous. And then once I get the hang of it all, they're all fine.
It's funny you bring that up, because I think there's This 2 to 3 minute video testimonial is really like a story that we're telling.
Yeah.
The story of this patient's kind of treatment path in a way. We all watch Hollywood movies or TV shows and stuff, and there's the intro kind of getting to know the person, right? What brought you into the podiatry clinic to see Dr. Franklin or Dr. McDannald, and that letting them have a little bit of time to describe what their problem was, the things they had tried, the frustrations they had experienced, then describe it, the condition, the treatment you received. Did you do it on your own? Did you see another doctor? There's ways of pulling that out of them, and like what was the trying to see that little struggle that they have, because there's always the intro, there's some kind of middle part struggle, or they just couldn't get the right treatment, or it just wasn't working for them with another podiatrist or something. That you have to like, we're not talking about bad mouthing people, but just it wasn't a good fit, and they found some level of frustration. But then how did they get to the other end of that? They don't have to go into details as far as I had a lapidus bunionectomy, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have to be like that, but they had a certain procedure that led to either a life-changing event or restored their level of activity since coming to see you in the clinic, and how has that changed their life in a way. And then just tell us about your experience with the staff and the podiatrist you worked with, and just letting them go with those open-ended questions. Like I said, asking good questions will lead to really good responses. And like I said, think about that very simple story arc where they're the hero, like the kind of hero's journey, right? They have a problem, they're looking for a solution, or there's a couple of bumps in the road, but then how do they get to that treatment or that way that gave them some resolution at the end? So if you think of it in that way, in 3 parts, then you're able to, you or your staff or the people you're working with can really create a compelling narrative that will connect with potential patients.
And the other good part too, when you're asking these questions, I think, even if you ask a question, they answer it poorly, you can just say, okay, because you're just going to let the video run.
Right.
Okay, I'll just ask you a question again, put a little bit more emphasis on what you said there, because that sounded really good. I just think a little bit more, and just give them that little, because you're the director of this as well.
Right.
So if they said something that was a really good point, you go, oh, that was really good. Can you say that again? And the next time they say it, might have a bit more enthusiasm in it. And then, because when you're doing the editing, you can cut it down to what actually worked best. So it's not that from you start the video, you have to have all the questions. If they make a mistake, that's fine. Just re-ask, just give them to do the question again or the answer.
No, that's a great point. It's something where if they cough in the middle of the take or something happens, like that's a great thing about video these days, is that whether it be an iPhone or a video camera, like you have unlimited amounts of material, right? Like back in the day when we're taking, for the young people on the podcast, you may not know what this is, but a film camera, and you have 24, 36 opportunities to take a good shot, you're a little bit more selective. But now you can just I guess you're sometimes limited by memory of a phone or of something, but you can just do unlimited video, right? So just get the best takes, take your time in doing it. I would say the next step is really understanding, asking yourself, is this something you want you and your staff to take on? Do you want to be the ones that plan the shoot? Is that something that you have a space within your clinic that you can really have good lighting? Maybe there's minimal background noise. You have some type of backdrop that maybe has the logo of your clinic. Is that something you want to take on and you feel like makes sense for you in your clinic, or do you want to outsource or hire someone that is a video production crew, not only to handle some of the shooting, but also maybe some of the prep work, that they would handle all the equipment, the lighting, those kinds of things? So it's important to make sure that whatever way you decide to go, that the patient feels comfortable and relaxed. And that just takes time for you and your staff to get comfortable doing it yourselves, but also sometimes by bringing a professional that's maybe worked in a healthcare setting, it helps speed that process up a little bit. Considering what kind of equipment are you going to use? Do you have a dedicated camera, a dedicated phone? Are you using a tripod or some way to make sure that you have good, steady, and professional looking footage? It's amazing what you can do these days when you have a tripod, a high quality camera, decent lighting, a backdrop, and a quiet space. A lot of that can be taken care of. Not you or your assistant or your marketing team or your office manager. You're just going to be asking these kind of open-ended questions, and it's just going to be really the patient's voice you're going to hear as you cut together. But knowing whether it's something you and your staff to do, maybe a marketing agency can cut some of that stuff together for you, or working with a film or video production crew, there's some different options you have there as far as planning and kind of recording the shoot.
Yeah, I did a 1-day video course, iPhone video course here in Cairns. And I said to them, when I went and did it, it was amazing. Just the little tips and tricks about getting the right angle and framing the subject and how you fade in and fade out. Just doing a one-day course yourself can make a massive difference to your video looking really boring, or just having that little bit more professionalism to it, where people go, "Oh, did they bring somebody in to do this, or did they do it themselves?" It just lifts that level a little bit.
Yeah, and that's a great thing about the tools we're talking about. Like, not a lot of them, most of them are pretty inexpensive. So you can practice at home with your family, practice at home with your staff and stuff until you feel comfortable, like you have a routine or you have some type of process in-house that makes sense. And if you don't feel comfortable with that, like, there's definitely other options and opportunities. There's the kind of the steps after getting that area set up is like recording the testimonials, right? You want to, like you talked about with the questions you ask, you want it to be as letting them know, just speak honestly and candidly about what their experiences have been. Obviously, utilizing these questions that you prepared to guide the conversation, but you also want to let it be flexible enough where they don't feel like you're just trying to pull a specific answer out of them. You really need to feel like you're having a conversation, and whoever's asking the questions of the patient needs to feed off them, like you and I, when you have conversations on this podcast. It's not just like Tyson asks a question, I answer segment, and then we move on. It's no, we're having a good conversation about different topics, and we feel free to just jump in and expand on certain things, like tell us more about this, or there's ways to dive into a conversation with someone when you're asking these questions. And whether it's recording multiple takes, there's a lot of opportunities you have in the next step we'll get to with editing, that a lot of this stuff can be pieced together in ways that make sense and really provide that narrative like we talked about.
We were saying before, the idea is just keep recording, re-ask the question if you need to re-ask the question. And then, like you said, the next part is editing and basically putting it all together.
Yeah, for sure. And editing the video, there's different ways of doing that, right? There's a lot of like free or inexpensive tools now available. We utilize something with this show, on our show here, to promote it, called Descript, which is a pretty interesting tool. Each Mac, if you have a Mac that comes out, you have iMovie to go about, and it's a free editing app, and it doesn't necessarily require a lot of time and effort to learn how to do that. So there's definitely free or cheap ways of doing it. Like I said, if you just want to offload it to a film production or an editing, they should be able to.
What's your video editing suite of choice? If you were editing a video, what do you use?
Yeah, so there's two main ones I use these days. So whenever some of you might have seen things on LinkedIn or on our Facebook, as far as like these kind of short 90-second or 2-minute clips that we use with the transcription, all those things. So I utilize two tools usually. One is what's called Descript. So this is basically a software that you load images or video into it, and it spits out, I'd say, about a 95% accurate transcript. And you can overlay images, overlay the text onto the video, and just decide what is going to be a rectangle or a square. So there's ways of editing that, and I can export it into something called ScreenFlow, which is a pretty simple video editor to chop up things a little bit more, or add music, or add some additional things. I probably would like to try to get better at this Descript program, where I'm just doing everything in there. But for right now, I'm focused on 2 different software platforms right now. How about yourself, Tyson? What do you like to use?
For editing videos, probably ScreenFlow is probably what I use, because it's just easy. I've used iMovie, and there just seems to be more moving parts with it. I get a little bit frustrated with it sometimes. However, iMovie, you can be doing it on your desktop, laptop, iPhone, iPad, and they all talk to each other. They know exactly where you are at different times. You can save it and then get on the other device and use it. Whereas ScreenFlow, biggest pain in the ass of ScreenFlow is whatever computer you have it registered on, that's the one you can't. So I figured out when I was traveling that you can't. But what I did figure out is if you use ScreenFlow on another machine, it'll come up and say something mode pops up, that you wouldn't post that video because it says this is the unpaid version mode pretty much. But when you get back to your main computer, you can then put that back in there and you take it off.
Yeah, you can definitely strip it out of there. That's a nice thing about the paid version of that program. I think it's
a good program, and I use Headliner for doing my other videos and stuff.
Nice. Yeah, it's really about trimming and editing these videos to create that kind of cohesive and engaging narrative we talked about, the story, the kind of power of storytelling. So like you said, we either use Headliner or Descript for the captions. It's nice to have titles. Maybe you're putting your clinic logo to make the videos really look professional. So we put our podiatry marketing logo in some of those videos, but keep it relatively short and focused, right? It's not, you don't want to hear about as much as maybe they want to tell you about their cat or their grandma, or if there's stuff that's not related to that narrative arc you want to tell, it needs to be, chopped out of there. And somewhere between 1 and 3 minutes in length is a good amount of time for a testimonial, because you want to tell that story in an engaging way, and in ways that will keep people listening to the video and kind of building trust in you and the care you provide. I also say that, like, after you get done with that rough cut, there are different ways to share and promote this video, right? There's so many different social media channels these days. You got LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, even on your own website, Google Business Profile. There's a lot of places where you can share this video and just really gain additional visibility for it. But also, if the patient is willing to do the video themselves too, they're probably really more than likely to share it on their social channels as well. So it's an opportunity to have that ongoing positive relationship with one of your patients when you can, and say, hey, we featured you on our Facebook, or we sent out a newsletter. If you want to send it to your friends and family, here is a link. So making it very easy for them as well. And they're probably more than happy to share it with you as well. But I think that's one of the things I would recommend, is that these videos can be reformatted and really reshared. And like I talked about, you have 5 or 10 of them. It's something you can go back to over years. It's not just a one and done situation. These are powerful things you can run campaigns on. If you have different demographics you're going after, there's different ways to mix up these to really get the most bang from the buck when you're spending the time and effort to make these video testimonials.
That's the thing, is once you've got the video, you can then chop it. You can make it shorter if you want to do just shorts for YouTube or something like that. You can make them slightly longer, and you can use them on Instagram, put them on Facebook, have them on your website. There's so many different places that you can actually put that information. The main part is capturing the information first. If you never have the video, you've got no chance of doing anything else. So I think when you get the opportunity to, you have a patient that's just the ideal patient. Sometimes you may not have everything just set up perfectly. I think in some businesses, and I've seen some of them do this, where they have a tripod with an old iPhone or something just hooked up, and a little microphone that just clicks into it. And that's always just set up in their clinic in a certain area. It's more in America because they do testimonials a lot more. And if they just have that perfect patient and the person's really good at talking, and they say to them, hey, would you love to do a testimonial for us about what you just told me then? And they go, yeah, not a problem. They just take them in this room. They've already got a little soundproof corner, plug the little lapel mic onto them, and they look into the camera, and bang, they just nail it first time. They go, thank you very much. So to me, it's, if you have the room to have an area where it's, okay, they're not perfect, but they're the sort of things that you can produce on a fairly regular basis, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's not too dissimilar from how we do this podcast, right? Like I got my little nook in my house. I've got the camera set up. I've got the microphone, and it takes a little bit of time to get a little bit of the lighting correct. But besides that, it's pretty much, let's get on this call and let's talk to each other and record the podcast. It's not too dissimilar from what happens when people are recording video testimonials. And these are powerful ways to communicate things that you might get ideas for your own marketing or ideas about your practice when you have these. Not only is it like great to get these insights and share them with your potential patients, but it helps you get feedback as well, right? They might say things that you never really thought about, right? Or maybe they even will say things that they never expressed in the clinic room when they're. So it is a great way to like display the great care you provide for people, but also it helps elicit feedback so you can really understand kind of your patient's journey and how you can play a role, not only for their journey, but also potential patients to get more of them to come into your clinic.
No, I agree 100%. So before we wrap up, have you got anything else you want to cover on this particular topic?
No, I think it's one of those things, like I said, there's huge benefits of doing this. I think it's a matter of, if you do have questions about how to get set up or what's some gear or what are some maybe places in your area to find video production capabilities, definitely happy to like help. So feel free to visit podiatry.marketing, send us a message, and Tyson and I can provide you some feedback or some help to get started in this area.
Yeah. Okay, Jim, that was great. So thanks for that. And I look forward to talking to you next week.
All right. See you, Tyson.
Okay. See ya.
Bye now.
Bye.